Hello, I'm Ren. I work at UXSFine as a technical designer, and today we're going to take a look at some Unreal Engine blueprints for character setup. I want to do a series where I look at different characters, the UX of first-person characters, how to make that juicy, third-person, top-down isometric. We'll do some stuff with static cameras as well. But today we're going to look at third-person setup from scratch, so let's get started with that. Straight away in the content browser, I'm going to create myself a new folder. Called it third person. In here I'm going to create a core folder. So the first thing that we're going to need is a game mode base class. So we'll call this GM_third person. We're also going to need a character. So we'll set up a character. Characters third person. We're also going to need a player controller, which is where our inputs will get mapped. Okay, so we'll call this BPPC third person. Save these. And in this game mode, what we can do is set up the links to our various classes. If we were doing HUD today, we would have created a HUD class. If we were doing multiplayer, we may have created a player state or a game state class to hold those replicated information. But today we're just going to set up our new player controller. So we have a third person one. Going to set up our third person character here. Those are the two things that we set up for that game mode. And we'll start in a new blank basic level, just like so. In the right hand side you'll have world settings. If you can't see that, you just have to go to window and turn on the world settings. Now from here we just need to select our third person game mode, GM third person. If I hit play now, you'll notice I can't do anything. There's no controls, there's no inputs. Let's save this map. We'll save it in here. We'll save it under levels. We'll save it as level third person. Okay. So to get started, we want to make sure that we can actually see this capsule. So I'm going to set this to be visible by turning off hidden in game, and I'm going to give it a camera. I want this to be on a spring arm so I can control how it reacts when the player moves the mouse, and it can sit over the top of the shoulder. So I've just moved that spring arm up and I'm going to add a camera to that. For this camera I actually want it to be offset slightly to the right. There's also some movement controls in the character. So if we type in rotation while selecting on the top most hierarchy element, which is the root class defaults of this class, you'll notice if I click something else, the details on the right represent what we're looking at. If I click on class defaults, it will select this top element, and if I click this top element, it will go to class defaults. Now in the class defaults, we have use controller rotation yaw. That means that when I set up the inputs and I turn the mouse, it's actually going to rotate the entire capsule, which in this case I don't want. I want to be able to orbit around the player. So today we're going to look at an orbiting camera. Turn that off. I also want to orient to the movement direction so that when my character has the camera turned looking to their back and I press W, I want the character to actually turn and move in that direction. So I'm going to orient to rotation to movement there. Lastly, on the spring arm, I want to use the pawn control rotation, which is what we're going to control with the mouse. I want to have that spring arm move with that control rotation. So we tick this box. Use pawn control rotation. Now in the event graph, I'm actually going to remove everything that's in here. I'm going to create a new graph called inputs. And this is where I'm going to have all of my input controls for look and move. Now the reason that we set up a third person player controller is because this is where we're going to set up our input mapping. I'm actually going to go to the root content folder to set up the base input maps. So we'll go input here for a new folder name. Right click, and under input you'll see input actions and input mapping contexts. So first we want to create an input action for look. Now I'll prefix this with IA for input action. And I want to create IA move. I also want to create an input action for jump. And I also want to create an input action for crouch. Okay, I'm going to save all of these, and now we're going to edit them. So I've hit enter, and we'll open those four in the same window, which we don't want. We'll open these individually. So for movement, it's a 2D axis. It's forward, back, left, and right. So that's that one. For look, it's the same. It's up, down, left, and right. So again, it's a 2D. Just double check we did that correctly. Yeah, 2D. And for jump and crouch, it's the default, which is just a Boolean. It just happens. So in our third person player controller, that's where we're going to put our actual input mapping. We've created the actions, but we haven't created a house for what those live under. And so what's really nice about these input mapping contexts, which I'm going to call this one basic, is that you can turn them on and off at any time. If you're a walking character, you might have certain inputs. If you're a driving character, you might not have a jump, for example. So that input mapping context for the vehicle will have one set of actions, and your character movement for the basic stuff will have something else. And so that's really nice. We can turn them on and off at runtime. And so for today, we're just going with the regular basic inputs, and so we need to add those in. So let's go with look. To set this look up, we're going to use the XY 2D axis. So that's that setup. And for move, we'll set up W, A, S, and D. So W, we'll do S for the second key, A, and D. So W is just 1, that's going to be straight. S, I need to be -1, so I'm going to add a modifier to this to negate the input. And then for the A key, it's to the left. It's because I'm going to use the right vector of the camera for the movement. This needs to be negative as well, and it also needs to be swizzled. And so typically the input is going to be forward as an axis, and I need it to be swizzled to be outputting X instead of Y on the 2D axis that the move input does. So that's swizzled. And then D is just swizzled. That is just going to be turned as so. So from here what we can do is type in IA, we can type in begin play in here and actually enable that. So we'll get the local player's input system, and we'll add a context, which is going to be that one that we've just made. So plug that in, and we're done here with this part. That just sets us up to have inputs, and now in our input graph that we made in our character, I'm going to create the look input, and I'm going to create the move input. Now from here we can break this, and what we're going to use is controller yaw and controller pitch. So we'll plug the X in here for the yaw, and the Y actually needs to be multiplied by -1, because otherwise it'll be inverted. You could always set this up as a user setting in the future. Plug that in. So we've already set up our look. Let's put a comment around that. That's the look controls. And then put the move controls. This one's a little bit more complex, as we'll need some directions to use. So again, we'll break this, and we will add movement input. Now this just applies it to the character movement component. If you've got your own pawn and you have flying movement, add movement input will affect that. So first we have X, okay, make a copy of this, and we're going to do the Y input as well. The next thing that we need to do is actually determine which directions these are in. And because we know that the camera is going to be turning in an orbit based on our settings that we set up, we're going to need some specific rotations for this. So I'm actually going to make a function for that. Let's make a function here, get move directions. I'm going to take the camera, I'm going to take the forward vector, and I'm going to take the right vector. And I'm going to multiply these to negate the pitch. So for the forward vector, we just want the XY of the camera. So roll, pitch, yaw. We do not want pitch. Well, sorry, in this case it's the Z axis. We don't want anything on the Z. We'll do the same for the right vector. We just care about the X and Y. And then we're going to normalize these back into a unit vector range. And then we can return these values as our forward and right directions. So this is forward and this is right. And plug that in. So now we have a nice little function for that. And because we know this doesn't control any state, we'll make it constant. Because we aren't running any functions, we can just run it as pure. It's quite safe to do that. And then we'll get the move direction here. So forward, right. Just keep things clean. I'm going to put this in a category with movement. So from here, what I should be able to do is when I hit play, I should see my capsule. I can move my camera around. I can move the capsule forward and back. You can see it turning based on the direction that I'm moving. And I have all of my look inputs set up. So back in the viewport, just checking my spring arm here. The camera actually has an odd Z, so we'll just lift that up. Okay, so we have that set up. Next thing that we want to do is actually add a character into this. So I've imported a character. We're going to use Leon. And this is his mesh right here. So let's have a look at him quickly. He's looking pretty good. We have to set up a animation blueprint. I was messing with this earlier, so I'll just delete it. I'm going to create an anim blueprint here, ABP underscore Leon. Let's go and take a look into that. So we get this output pose graph, which is controlling what he is doing. And in fact, if we go and take a look at animations for this character, we have a jump. It's actually all controlled through curves by the looks. We have a third-person idle. If we press play on that, he just has sort of a basic idle there. We have a run and a walk cycle. We also have a jump start, or a jump loop, sorry, and a jump start. So we're going to implement all of these actions. So one thing that we didn't do, that we'll do later, is add the jump. But we'll start with just the movement. So in these animations, we know that there's an idle. So let's get that set up. Let's get this into the animation blueprint. The way I like to do this is I like to create a state machine. We'll just call this movement. And in here, we need a state. So we'll add a state, and this is going to be idle in this case. And in here, we're just going to play a sequence. That's going to be idle. So play third person idle. If I compile that now, it's the only animation that sits within our anim graph. So it just plays. Another thing we can do is say evaluate this, which should allow us to do an explicit time. Okay, so we're good there. Now back in movement, there's an event, another state, that is actually being in the air. So we'll just call this in air. We'll actually rename this to on ground. And we can go back and forth from here. And inside these, we can put some functions for whether we're grounded or not. So we will create a variable for that in the event graph. What I like to do is I like to use a begin play. I like to get this pawn, see if it's valid, and then promote it to a variable so that I'm not doing it every frame as this runs. So we'll pass this to character. So we know we're running this on a character. Promote that to a variable character. And down here on the evaluation that happens every frame, we'll just validate that that is ready. And we'll ask if it's grounded. So is it moving on the ground? That's actually an interface call. I want to use the call directly from the character movement component. We'll promote this to a variable, promote to grounded. And the reason that we do this is because if we just directly call this in the condition, I'll show you. So we have this condition that we made. We'll go back a step. So we made these two states and we have some conditions that can go back and forth. in the condition for being in the air, we need to be not grounded. Now, if I was to have something that said not grounded like this, you'll see this fast path here means that it's faster to run the animation. It's gone now because we're referencing something, we're actually calling potential functions on it. It's no longer fast. So if we do not grounded from our cached variable instead, we'll notice when we compile that comes back again. Similarly, back in the movement graph, we can go back to grounded when we're grounded again. Okay, so we have two states. Also for the defaults, we're grounded by default. So you'll see he's set up now to be grounded by default. One thing we can do is we can say that when we jump, we should be able to actually play an animation in here. What we'll do is we'll do that through a montage. For now, we just want to check that jumping actually works, that we can go into the air. And in fact, if we use the edit selected instance down here to make him jump, there's actually nothing in here. So we want that loop that we had, the third person loop. So this is what he looks like when he's in the air. It's a little bit glitchy in my opinion, so could have had a better animation set for that, but that's okay. So we'll work with this just as an example. Now, I could be grounded, I could be in the air. There's no landing animation in the anim set, so there's just jump loop and jump start, and that's okay. Some animation sets actually have extra things, and we can look at that in another example. So we've set up our evaluation to see if we're grounded or not, and we've got something that allows us to be grounded or not grounded. So that's the first setup there. Let's actually get a jump going inside our inputs. So event IA jump. If this happens, we're going to make the character jump. Let's have a look at some of the settings for that. Firstly, I want to say that when this is first pressed, we will jump as long as we can jump. Then we will call jump. And also when we let go of the input, we'll call stop jumping. So when this is completed, we'll call stop jumping. And what this is important for is back in the character, if we type in jump, you'll notice there's some jump velocities and there are some jump max hold time and a jump max count. So I could set this to 2 and set this to 1. And now if I go and jump, it doesn't work because it's not in the IMC. So let's make sure it's in the IMC. We've got look, we've got move, let's add jump. That'll be on spacebar. So I can jump. If I hold the button down, you'll see I actually go into the air. It applies the velocity the whole duration for that 1 second. And because I've got 2 jumps, I can do it once and I can do it a second time. Can't do it any more times. I can also do a little light jump. You can move around while you do that. So those are cool. It almost feels like a jetpack. What I want to do though is actually just want to set that back to defaults. So I'm just going to have a basic jump. It's a little bit weak, so maybe we'll go to 0.25. That feels good. Now that we've got a jump, we can be grounded or not grounded, which means we can test those animations. So what we'll do is we'll go to the mesh, and in the viewport we'll set that up. So we're going to pick the ABP for Leon, and we're going to pick the Leon character. Moving down by 90 units, so it's actually touching the floor, and we'll see that usually the forward direction, you see this arrow here, it's usually like negative 90 degrees, so we'll set that up. Hit play now, got my character, I can move around. It's not got his move cycles in yet, it's just idle, but when he jumps, he does a little bit of a hop. One more thing that I want to do before we get any further is actually add what's called a montage to that animation when we jump. So this is actually an event, so we'll go in the event graph. So when we jump, we want to play a montage on the character. We don't have the montage yet, so we're going to go make it. So over here we've got this jump. We'll browse to this asset, We'll create a montage from it. So we'll call this AM Leon jump. So that's good there. So this is our jump animation. Actually, that's a landing animation. So I guess playing this backwards will actually give us the result that we want for jumping. So that'll be the jump, and then this will be the land. So I'm going to play this backwards, -1 on the scale. Yep, so it does a jump there. And this is what's in a slot name called the default slot, and we actually need to apply that into our animation system. I'm also going to do one for landed. I'm going to make that actually play forward. Okay, so we've got 2 animations now that we can play. The first one is jump, and we've also got landed. So when the character lands, we just want to play landed. And in our animation blueprint, in our event graph, we need to actually add a location for this to start overriding. There's a lot more complex things you can do with an animation blueprint to have a slot do something to only the arm based on some, what you can do like blend by bone, for example, layered blends. You can do things based on conditions for blending in that way as well. We'll actually do one of those soon for running and walking or idling. So we have this now. Should be the case that when we jump we get some animations play. Let's just double check what's happening. So let's make sure that these are being hit. Yep, so we're going to play this jump and we're going to land. I think what the problem is that the animations are possibly so short that we're not actually seeing that. So let's have a look at the animations. The animation is I think the animation is 0.2 long, which means that these blend outs of 0.25 mean that you actually never see it. So that'll solve that problem. That's blending in and out. So now this should just play. Yeah, so the jump animations, again, they're not great, and because there's no blending, it again also doesn't look great. So what I'll do is, for the landed, I actually do want to have some blend time. Let's have a little bit of blend time here, it's like maybe 0.1. That might just feel a little bit better. There you go. Okay, so the next thing is to get the actual movement working. So while this character is running, we want him to show that animation. So what we can do is we can put a blend in here, blend by bool, and we'll call it moving. And we'll have another animation. We'll just change the animation that we're looking at, and this will be the third person run. So we can test that now by just saying moving. You can see that he's running over there. Then we just need to set up something over here in the graph that runs on tick to set that variable for moving. And the way we'll do that is we'll get the velocity, we'll get the length, and if it's not equal to 0, then we must be moving. It's a nice quick and simple way to do that. Okay, so now we're running. We can run in different directions, we can do the jump. And so that's everything set up for a basic little character. And that's what I wanted to show today, was just the first part of a setup there. Don't think we have a crouch or any other animations. Let's have a look what else we could implement. Okay, so What have we got? We have a walk. Let's have a look at the walk cycle. So what we could do is we could set up a blend space that goes between idle, walking, and running based on holding the shift key. So the first thing I want to do is actually set up an input mapping for that. So we'll create a new input mapping. We'll call this one IA sprint, and we'll put that in here. Save everything, go back to our character, in our inputs, we'll do IA sprint. We'll have a little variable in here called sprint. And when we start pressing this, we'll turn it to true, and when we're completed with this, we'll set it to false. And we'll reference that inside of our animation blueprint. What we could do is we could actually change this character to our third person character. And over here what we'll do is we'll actually cast this to our third person character. This isn't exactly modular, could have used an interface to do that, but for the interest of time we'll go with this method, which means that we're able to get sprint from here. Now if we actually plug that sprint variable into anything, I believe it will get rid of the fast path. In fact, we don't have a fast path in here. If we go to here, plug this in, I think we lose the fast path, yeah. So we actually have to promote this to a variable of our class. So of our animation class, so we'll say sprint, or sprinting in this case, I suppose. In fact, we're going to use a blend space. So this variable actually isn't interesting to us, because let's go make the blend space and that'll get us started where we actually need to go. So back here we got the walk cycle, right? There's actually an idle run 2D here, but I'm going to make my own one to show the process. So if I get the third person idle, I can create, I cannot create it from here. Can I create it from here? Okay, so we're going to find the skeleton, we're going to find this character, we're going to create a 1D blend space, BS movement. I'm going to move that to the animations folder, which I think is in here. Okay. So in this blend space, we have a horizontal track that has no name. So let's go name that. We'll name it speed. And we're going to say that sprinting is 900 units. Yeah, sure, 900 units. We'll start there. I'm going to have 3 divisions. So idle, walking, run, which means I actually have 2 divisions. Okay, so idle goes here. We're going to have a walk, and we can hold the control key to check that out. And then we can have the run at 900. So this should be, actually this is 400 right now. I think we can just move this anywhere on the track, yeah. So let's just make sure this is at 300. Okay. And the reason for that is back in our character, if we look at our move speed, so the current max walk speed is 600. I'm actually going to make it 300 by default. When we're sprinting, what we'll do, and this isn't going to work in a replicated environment, but for a single player game this is fine. We're going to set the max walk speed to 900 while we're sprinting. We're going to set it back to 300 whenever we're not sprinting. And that gives us a basic sprint. Now that we have that blend space and we have the movement speed set up, in fact what we could do is we could jump in here and just press shift, see if it's working for the move speed stuff. Which it isn't, because in the IMC I did not actually set the shift key as the input. So if we open this up, just press shift. Now when I move faster while I'm holding shift, and that's going to be represented in our animation once I go to the grounded tree here and I plug that blend space in. So if I go grab the blend space, we'll promote this to a variable called speed. And now instead of playing and blending by pose, we're looking at doing a blend space instead. So we've seen two different types of animation management in here. So we have the speed variable, we need to set that up. So instead of using this for movement, we're going to use it for speed there instead. We can actually get rid of that variable for moving. And now if we scrub the bar, we get to 300, we're walking. We get to 900 or above, we're sprinting. So let's go have a look. We're walking. You can see we're sliding a bit. So we're going to need to change some of that. And then when we sprint, we get this, we get that jump in here, get a little bit of a landing. So that's basic character setup. For the sliding, let's just take a quick look into that. So what I'm seeing by looking at the lines is that my character is actually sliding across the floor. There's two ways we can solve this. We can either increase the rate at which this plays, so let's play this at 1.2. It starts to feel a little bit better. Still a little bit of slide in there. So let's try 1.3. Okay, so that feels a little bit better. The animations are just demo animations, so they do have a little bit of glitchy sort of movement in there. But this feels good, and there, we're nice and idle. So let's get rid of that character capture because we don't need that anymore. Cool. And that is a third-person character short little video, and I'll be back for another one on first-person characters. Cheers.